Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to do things a little differently. I've been pretty busy lately and I'm waiting on those parts from T3 still for the car. So we're going to go over media I have on the Gtfour. And to start off with, we're going to start with my personal Bible that I've been working on for years now. This is the collection of things I've done in the car. We had the big server crash on alltrack.net around 2004. And after we got things going and I started my new project thread, I went ahead and started printing things off just in case they lost data again. And pretty much what this covers, I mean, this has everything from notes, a list of stuff I've done, select pages from BGBs, wiring diagrams, schematics, things that also isn't included in the BGBs I own. Or the things I have in the digital BGBs I have a ST205 and another version of the 185 BGBs, and they have some information that is not included. Here you can see forum posts. I've highlighted things so I can know why I have them in here. And you know, simple how-tos that people have written up on the boards. It's all segmented off, depending what it is. Write-ups from part manufacturers, info on the turbo systems, that sort of thing. Some other instructionals for other cars, but that can be applied to ours. This whole folder here is meant for suspension stuff. I have everything in here from specs and alignments and all that. And these are the English and Japanese versions of the T&HA coilover books for the ST185. And it just kind of goes over the assembly, installation, recommended specs. The English version has actually less stuff than the Japanese one, but of course I can't read most of what's in here. But they go into a little bit more detail with different things, with illustrations, how to adjust it, assembly, tools. Has this nice little diagram here of, I guess, the shock dyno, and that's that whole segment there. Next, I'll go over actual Toyota publications I have. These are the BGB. If you have one of these cars, these are worth picking up. You actually find them pretty decent price secondhand on eBay now. But everything from torque specs to just assembly. The engine doesn't apply to me as much with this, but there's excellent wiring diagrams, assembly procedures, and so forth. It's just a must-have if you're going to have these cars. I believe Toyota still has these in stock, and the part numbers are on the boards for picking these up. See, this whole section here is what made it possible for me to be able to do the 205 swap. I used the 185 harness with the 205 engine, and I was able to figure out all the wiring thanks to the schematics back here. Another Toyota item. This actually came with my car. This is from the first owner, and they paid $27,000 for the car in 1992, which is quite expensive, but it even has the mileage and all the features. Mine had everything but ABS and the rear limited slip differential, which we've come to the conclusion was never standard. I believe it was treated as a Tier D add-on part, but there's no exact details on how those came to be in our cars, if they were at all in any US model. Another nice thing that came to the car, see, the car came from Grand Rapids, Michigan originally. This is a collection of, but the warranty guide, this is pretty generic. Came with all Toyotas, I think the same issue. Supplement guide, this covers more, I guess, regions, different states you live in, and notices related to the car. VIN stickers. The owner's manual, this is actually really nice. It's got a nice little set of specs and just maintenance things that aren't even in the BGB. It's just a nice little compliment to have with the car. But what's even better because if you still have the factory alarm system, you realize how much of a pain it is. This booklet has made the alarm system livable, but it's got a lot of details. You would think just having only one button, there's not a whole lot to it, but several pages in this book. 12 pages in this book that covers quite a bit. Next, I'm going to go over third-party publications. Start with this one. I bought these pages a while back, several years ago, and it's an article on the development of the ST-185 and that it's pretty much dead before it's even come out yet. And this is by Car and Driver. And one thing they talk about how much they really like the car and how it's well built, and they like a lot of things about it. But they said that due to the price point, it just couldn't survive on the market, because you can get a DSM for, I think, around $5,000 less that was slightly quicker. And I mean, the way people look at numbers, they're going to obviously go that route, and that's exactly what happened. But it also talks about some of the development of the car. They mentioned that it had a lot of input by women. The ST model actually stands for Secretarial Transport and was intended as a woman's car, though that's not how things typically work. It also talks about the curves of the car. It was very curvaceous for two reasons. One, rigidity, and two, it made it more difficult for other manufacturers to copy their body lines. They say that this was the, I think it was the 956 equivalent to Porsche, just because of technological advances. But it's a nice little bit. Has some specs in the back. I think 0 to 60, 7.2 seconds. Top speed 140 miles an hour, and just various things like that. But it was a neat little piece to kind of see the history in the car. This next magazine here, this is one of the few U.S. magazines I've seen feature all tracks. And it's pretty neat to see this come about. This guy was on the forums at one point. This car was sponsored by, I forget which clutch company, Center Force. And even they said that the car takes, I think, around 8 hours or more to do the clutch job on it for them. And that's all they do is clutches. You think they would do it faster, but that's where they're at on that. But silver actually reminds me of mine a little bit. But of course they have the graphics on the front and sides. Separates it. I believe the car ran, it used nitrous. I think it ran a 12.4, and that might have been due to the rolling diameter of the tires. It was running 18s with a pretty large tire. But there's some neat things about it. He didn't have AC, so you can see where he changed the vents into just a whole gauge setup, which was pretty neat. Engine bay shot. The Solom times they said were good, but I wonder if they did more experimentation with the tires and went with some wider rubber. The tarred sidewall might have gotten better times. Yeah, we're on 18-inch wheels, 225, 40 18s, which is much taller than stock. Next, this publication I picked up at a consignment store, something like a Goodwill or whatever. So I ended up with a torn cover, but it was neat. It was a 7th gen Celica that they crammed a 205 into. 500 horsepower, TRD, Ron Millen worked on it. And it was a really neat project. But the problem was, I mean, for as much horsepower as they had, they ran, it was quite slow. I think it was like a 13-second quarter mile an hour or something. Yeah, 13.3, which is just ridiculous for that much power. They didn't do something right. I'm not sure what, but it looks like a quality job. But I think some people from the forums, MR2 or alltrack.net or DCOC, could have probably gotten better drag times out of the car with similar horsepower numbers. But I did really like how the engine bay was set up. It was pretty neat, the charge core they used. Next, this is probably what I'll spend the most time on. These are hyper revs. They did two versions for the Celica. This one primarily covers 205 and 185, and this is mostly 7th gen, but it has a lot of the 205 and some 185 stuff in there as well. And I've talked to people who haven't gotten these yet because they're not that cheap. I think they're around anywhere from $25, $30 a piece, and they've not been able to see them. So I'm going to use this time to kind of preview them and let you get a chance to see what's inside, and you can decide if you want to pick them or not. But I think they're really neat. Most of it's in Japanese, and most of it's in Japanese. But there are some specs that use standard numbers on here. And so we're just going to browse through here, and you can decide if it's something you want to get. I'll start with the later model, or later edition. Even though it does cover 7th gen, I'll jump into some of the other stuff. I'll kind of go quick over the 7th gen stuff. I'm a huge fan of these wheels. They offer them in the 5x1 14-bolt pattern, I think in 17x8.5. And someday I might try to grab a set of 5 for the car. They're as light as T37s, and I like their style. It's somewhat unique. Alright, here's some 205 stuff. And it talks about what shop had put together each model. Now this model is actually really cool. This is the Pit Road M. It's even got a little induction scoop version of the headlock cover. Nice little engine bay, a lot of suspension work, some really cool brakes. It has these discontinued Volk wheels, which I'd like to see again. These are some of the lightest wheels they ever produced, but sadly you can't get them anymore. And on the next page is another awesome car, the Garage Cruise. It uses some 205 bodywork. I don't like how they cut up the front, but I'm sure they had functional reasons to do it. You can see there's oil coolers in some of these areas they cut off. But it's a cool car. It was thanks to this car we were able to kind of figure out some of the widths for tires. This one runs a staggered offset. It uses a 255/40/17 in the front and a 235/45/17 in the rear. Both sets of tires are 17x9.5, 35 offset. And it was thanks to that we were able to figure out some bigger sizing for our vehicles. And this has sections in these books for different parts that used to be manufactured. Which this is another nice resource for that. Some of these things you'll never see again. Or you might be able to find out about and track them down through a third-party company that sells broke cars from Japan or whatever. But all these various exhausts that used to be made for the different models of Celica. More of the parts in this is primarily geared towards 7th gen since it was the car in the market at the time, but there's still some 205 and 185 things in here. All these different ECUs that were produced. Internals, ignition, timing. And some of these parts in here are universal. Oils and coolants. Large variety of radiator options. Sard even made a radiator for us at one point. Clutches and flywheels. I'll zoom in on this. This is the Tier D LSD unit that was made. There's a rear one, and this is the front and center combo they used to offer. It was about $3,500 back in the day, and that actually seems like a deal at this point, considering we can't get any front differentials anymore. But what it did, if you see here, on the left, this is the front differential, but on the actual original design, the front and center differential is in here, and over here is a viscous coupler. So what they've done is they have made the front differential its own, and they replaced the viscous coupler with a center differential. I don't know how reliable it is. Most of the pictures I've seen of them are broken, so I don't know how great of a unit it was, but it's certainly an option, or was an option at some point. Different gear sets. C1, I believe you can still get the C1 gear set for our transmissions, and I forget, I think it's around 2,500, but it's a special order, and I think it's 3 to 6 months wait time. Different strut and spring solutions, strut bars, brake parts, rear diff cushions. I have a solid one, but they actually had produced at one point one with a polyfill. The factory rubber one just is not reliable and not a great design, and so upgrading that is a must. Rear-wheel drive GT race car Celica. Not much of a 7th gen left in it. This used to be the fastest front-wheel drive drag car at one point, based off the 6th gen, using a 3S GTE. Go through quickly. And it has some breakdowns of some tuning and things along those lines. Of course, most of it I can't read, so I'll kind of breeze through here quick. Websites, most of these don't exist anymore. History of the Celica, various forms. This is the lightweight rally model of the 185. It was a narrow body, pretty much stripped. Had a different gear ratio. 1st through 4th was a tight, close gear ratio with a standard 5th gear. Different shops in Japan for getting the cars worked on and tuning. And let's see, there's still more in here, but I'll kind of breeze through since it's mostly 7th gen. Exterior bits. There's some body work for the 5th gen. I've seen these replicated over here by Ubani, except for this one. The Hero one I've never seen done. There used to be quite an aftermarket for these cars. And a lot of these parts probably still exist. You just gotta be able to hunt them down out of Japan and Asia. Various wheels. That's all of that issue. Now this one has a lot more stuff on it because it's primarily the Gtfour. Now this was a wide body kit that was made for the 5th gen. The Messiah, I believe it was called. And it had some interesting things about it. The front lip has a lot of potential if it was completed. I like the flares, but I'm not keen on the fake scoop. And the wing's not bad at all. Here's a bit more on it. Says the wheels are 275, 35, 18 in the front, and 315, 30, 18 in the rear. Most likely it was a front-wheel drive vehicle. I don't see the gas tank back here. They just use the RC front body work. But I don't like everything about it, but I think there's some interesting aspects to it. This body kit here, this was actually the one that was on that red Garage Cruise ST-185 in the other issue. It was just modified from the 205. This is an official lip that used to exist. There's another version of it that has been replicated in the UK through fiberglass, but I don't know how available it is. Sard MIG cars. Two other, a narrow body and a wide body that have Sard exhausts. Actually, some 165s in here as well. This 165 has 205 factory wheels on it. Looks pretty good. Different specs on the engines, beams, G, different forms of 3SGT. Some nice illustrations. Bit on the WRC. TTE. I'm sure there's some great information in here. More Celica history on the various models. I used to have one just like that. That was my first Celica. It was an 84 notchback. And then back in here, we've got the a bit on tuning, and then it goes into the catalog bits. Yeah, there's the Arouse MIG that I've got, if it still look new. And there's some other exhausts on here that I'd actually never seen or heard of in the States. Tons of ECU options. This TJ one, I actually believe is on the boards right now for sale, and they were saying that it's the same as SARD and a couple other ones that they just use their work and say it's another brand. Clutches and flywheels, handling. There's a bit in the other one that I glanced over. It was a kit for the 205 brakes to fit on a 7th gen. Which is pretty interesting. And I'm curious if that would actually be applied to the, and here's another close-up of the differential system. If that might be applied to the 185, since they're actually pretty similar in their dimensions on the spindles. Suspension parts. Wheels and tires. Of course, these tires are obsolete at this point. What's nice about this issue is they actually show the 6th gen with different wheels on it. A lot of these wheels, what I like about this is you can kind of see where some of the styles came from and were replicated. Because the thing about this is actually a pretty old publication, and you can see what used to be popular and then some variances that exist now. BBS hasn't really changed much in a long time. Works. They changed the spoke design slightly. This Wed Sport wheel was actually had a special offset for the 6th gen or 3rd gen Gtfour, just for the rear track is shorter than the front. And there's some interviews in here. I can't read much of it. There's some specs in here as well. That's kind of neat, seeing the years things were produced and the different weights. And yeah, here's the 165 specs or 160 specs, 5th gen specs, all the different models: Gtfour Rally, Group A, GTR forward steering, Active Sport forward steering, ZR. SR, convertible, and so on. And this goes in the different specs, gear ratios. This is the source I used for putting the gear ratios on the boards. Yeah, a nice little breakdown illustration of the suspension and drivetrain. And the 6th gen specs. More shops in Japan. These are other issues, which are pretty cool if you have any other vehicles besides the Gtfour. Let's see, and there's some more tuning parts in the back. Let's see if there's anything worth looking at. Aero parts. There's a pretty big aftermarket for the 6th gen. Now here's the 5th gen parts. Here's I think it's a Curran It was a 6th gen with rectangular headlights. Might have been cool to see a Gtfour hood version on that. Different body kits. There's a red version of the Garage Cruise Messiah kit. Steering wheels, seats, I mean, all that's fairly universal. Gauges. Different brands of Raleigh mud flaps, interior bezels, and things like that. And that's all that issue. And lastly, even though this is not directly related, since I think the thing that really holds back this car from being competitive is typically the nut behind the wheel. Driving, you know, we can do a lot of mods to these vehicles, and they'll perform better, but becoming a better driver will do a lot more than any mod, as far as I'm concerned. And this book, even though I've not even read the whole thing, there's a lot of brilliant things in here as far as describing. And it's hard to imagine a textbook explaining things to make you a better driver, but this actually does a great job of it. And I think one of the most important things it had in there that I've gotten to so far, and I'll eventually read the whole thing, is the mathematics involved in grip when you're taking a turn. It's a very interesting piece, and I can't recommend this book enough. But that covers this segment. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe this will sway you to pick up some more media on the car, or even, you know, keep a log of your own. And just don't forget to rate and subscribe, and stay tuned as more parts come in. I'll start working on some new projects, and just check back soon.